Okay, welcome everybody. Let's start off with the agenda for today. We'll start with a brief overview of Optimum Networking. We have several clients with us today, as well as folks that are just getting to know Optimum. So we'll give a quick overview of who we are, what we do. Next, we will introduce a special guest who helps with cyber liability, that type of thing outside of cybersecurity. That's Greg King, and he'll give a quick, brief introduction on cyber liability. If you guys have any questions about that, I'm sure he'll be happy to help out either during this call or down the line. At that point, it's really like to turn it over and hear from you. What concerns you about cybersecurity and the cyber threats out there? I have a list of concerns that are pretty common, and there was always stories and horror stories to tell around this area, and people have some concerns. So I'd like to get those concerns out. So at that point, I encourage you to unmute and sort of, or you can even put those concerns in a text or in a message, and I will I'll share those, because after we do that, we'll be introducing our special guest, the engineers Brett Ammerman and Bill Townsend, and they will be going through in detail the layers of cybersecurity so that you can pretty much sleep at night as business owners. And that includes, your backups, your external protections, your desktop protections. We'll go over a new offering called SOC SIM. We'll go a little bit more in detail about that. Talk about, the ever critical user training and look at policy. So from there, we'll wrap up and certainly answer any questions you have at the end. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So Optimum Networking, we were established in 1995, and our mission is helping people succeed with technology. What I really love about that mission is, while we're great at technology here at Optimum Networking, we never lose sight of what's really important about technology and how it serves people and how it helps people reach their goals, especially their business goals. Helping protect people from cyber threats out there is an excellent execution of our mission. Overall, we support users with our support desk and all of our proactive tools. We maintain your networks and your backups and your servers. Obviously, cybersecurity is what we're talking about today. We also offer long-term cyber strategy and planning for your IT infrastructure. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce Greg King. Greg, you want to take it from here and just give us a quick overview of the importance and the necessity of cyber liability.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for introduction. So I do have a lot of slides here today. I'm not going to go over all of them, especially not in depth, but I wanted to have everyone have access to them so you can review them afterwards. And if you have any questions about your current coverages for it, or what you should look for going forward to talk to your current agent even, I have my contact information here, and I'm happy to talk through it just to make sure you are going to be properly protected the best we can. So with cyber insurance, what we want to do is just set the stage for you, and I'll talk about a little bit about the policy, the underwriting of cyber liability insurance, and market conditions for us. So really, when we're looking at cyber liability, we're saying the thing that we didn't think would happen has happened. What do we do now? And really, we want to look at and see how we can prevent it. Are you prepared to respond? Do you have the right policy in place? Do you have the right partnerships, such as Optimum? Who can help you? Your current agent, the insurance carriers, Optimum, and as well as what can your operation afford? And that's not just what you can afford as far as if there's a loss, but what you can afford for your policies. Because as you go through it, there's a lot of different coverages you can have, and you need to find the right balance of properly protecting yourself, but also not putting yourself in a bad financial situation for that. This chart here just talks about the types of cyber losses that are happening. Just one note I'm going to make you know of is 98% of cyber incidents right now are shifted to the small and medium-sized enterprises. They're not necessarily targeting the large companies. So that's just something that I want people to be aware of, just to know that it's all size companies. And here, the cost of the loss. In 2018, the average cost of a ransomware attack cost $10,000. And in 2020, the average cost has jumped up to $154,000. And really, when we talk about insurance and a ransomware attack or any attack, I talk to my clients and prospects about looking at it as a way to make sure you're still in business if you have an attack. Because the worst thing that would happen is if you aren't properly protected and you're a business owner, you'll be working for someone else essentially, just because of these attacks are costing so much money right now. And when you look at the policy, not all policies are equal. The carrier that you have, the broker that you work with, and that develops these policies are really important. The types of coverages you have will be a third-party coverage, a first-party coverage, and we'll talk a little about resources as well. Third-party coverages, it's going to cover multimedia liability. Now, this could be if someone hacks in and there's some slander, some defamation type stuff. If there's bodily injury to another party or property damage. This could be from an area if you saw, like for instance, with Tesla or an electronic car, if someone hacks into there and there's injuries, that's their cyber liability coverage can't do that. And based on the industry that you're in, there's specific endorsements you can add to your policies to make sure you're properly covered. So it's really working with your agent to make sure you're partnered and aligned to do that. And I think also when business people look at the policy, they're thinking of first party coverages and what it's going to cost them. If there's an interruption, are you going to still be able to get your business income? Are you going to be able to fix the reputation to your brand? Extortion and what they're going to pay. These are all pretty large. For instance, the hacks that happened recently with the pipeline hack and JBS, they paid the ransom. If they had the correct policies, those are something that they could be covered for them. So those are all different types of first party coverages. But really also another really important part is the resources you get with you having a policy. The insurance carrier is going to be paying your legal fees if there's any lawsuits or anything that's happening, whether you're being sued or you need to go after someone, and also forensics. Doing a deep dive to see where the attack occurred, where the gap was, and what the actual true losses are is covered by the policy. And crisis management, setting up new offices if needed, new hardware, and everything that can be done for that. So that's some areas that the policy will cover for you.
Something to add to that, Greg.
Yeah.
Optimum Networkin, we have had the experience where we have had clients, or not clients, but actually prospective and new clients where they were hacked. They hired Optimum to come in and do major cleanup and replacement of systems and that type of thing. And we know that that was covered through their cyber insurance. So even it could cover your IT costs in terms of recovery as well. Exactly.
And when you're partnering with companies like Optimum and you're setting up beforehand the correct cybersecurity IT in place, those are all factors that will go into it, like for here, the underwriting of how they determine what the cost of your policies are going to be. And with more attacks that have been happening, they're on the rise. They're not going to slow down. And they're really not going to stop. So they're doing more scrutiny, really detailed applications. I'm working with one company right now. They are a blockchain type company, and it's a long app. It's about 20 pages for them based off of that stuff. But they're really looking for detailed information to make sure they're properly covering it. Even though the internet's been around for a while, these hacks have been happening. As far as the insurance goes and the claims, they're still relatively new. The premiums are going up. If you have a policy now, you're going to see increases, unfortunately, probably 30 to 40% maybe next year. If you don't have a policy and you just get one, it's going to be significantly higher than people that currently have them. So it's really making sure you're properly protected now and in the future for cost-effective ways for it. And regulations are changing. I know that was a really quick, brief overview for everything, and I'd be happy to talk in depth more if you have questions, or even if you want to talk another time. I'm happy to go over this with everyone. There's a lot that goes into it. It goes very well with what Optimum is doing with their cyber protection and helping you protect yourselves, and it's a multi-factor way to do that.
You bet. Thanks so much, Greg. And we are making it a standard question to all of our clients and all our prospective clients if their level of coverage in terms of cyber security. We do everything we can, and you'll see in this presentation that that's quite a bit. But nothing is failed proof with the level of threats that's out there. So you really need to get that back end covered. And Greg, I think you pretty much went over all of these points. And the most important things is the cyber liability folks and the IT folks like us are really working together to make sure that it's like, are you going to insure a building without a sprinkler system? Well, maybe, but your premiums will be much, much higher. Same type of thing as if you're going to have a company without cyber the correct cyber protection out there, you're really gonna it's gonna cost you in the long run not having the type of protection that we're going to talk about. So thank you very thinking a lot about that. So
Thank
all
you.
right, you betcha. Thanks, Greg. So here's some of the issues that I hear commonly. So I'm going to read them through, and then, as I said, I'd like folks to unmute and just express some concerns that you may have or some questions you want to make sure the engineers cover today. So has you or your company experienced a cyber breach? And if so, what was the impact on it? What is your perception of the cyber threats out there? Who are the bad guys? What do they look like? How confident are you in your current cybersecurity measures for your company? If you are supported by a managed service provider, how confident are you in their cybersecurity to protect themselves? That's very critical. What concerns you most about a cyber breach? Are you aware of national or international regulations that your company or industry are bound to? Things like HIPAA, SOC, GDPR, these types of things. And what do you consider an effective backup strategy? Because we know that backups are critical with that as well. So what types of questions you guys have out there, or things that you'd like to share about current cybersecurity concerns?
Well, I had a question. Recently in the news, there's been this ransomware quite a bit, and I was just curious as to how are these companies, much larger than me, getting hit by this? What is the access point that they're getting into the system? And then why don't, just a standard backup, why isn't a standard backup enough protection? Because obviously it's not.
That's an excellent question, Joe. Brett or Bill, do you want to jump in and kind of, I know you'll be talking about that a fair amount, but do you want to give a quick overview of that?
Yeah, so it's a great question about, how can these companies that have, bigger budgets, bigger staff, more money to spend on security get hacked? And the answer is very simply the human element. So you can secure every endpoint, every ingress, egress, every firewall in your environment, but without good user training, that's where the mass majority of these breaches come from. And that's one of the offerings that we specialize in our security as a service, is around that, training element and how to educate employees on spotting phishing emails and things of that nature. And then we've also got some enhanced tools that we'll talk about a little bit later that a lot of other companies that are bigger don't necessarily deploy in their environments because they're still focused very much on the edge of their network instead of on the inside of their network. And then Brett, do you want to answer about the backups?
You bet. That's a great question. We just want to make sure that for when you start talking about backups, if we focus on that pipeline, that incident on the East Coast where they were hacked, generally what you find out is how big is your infrastructure and how well prepared are you to restore everything. In a situation like that where they may have dozens of servers or sometimes hundreds of servers, if they had to go out and restore every server, it would take, well, weeks. And so do they have that much time? Do they have that much bandwidth to get everything back up and running? And to get the pipeline back up and running, they really didn't have that luxury. If you don't have a warm site or a hot site that you can flip a switch and say, we're going to lose 4 hours worth of data, then it's not realistic to say we can restore this, even if you have good backups. So sometimes it comes down to how much time you have to get things back and running for your customers.
Very good, Brett. And a couple of folks have chimed in on the chat talking about the user awareness training that goes out to all employees. And that's using KnowBe4 over at NEFI, and we also are using something else that Kim mentioned. So we'll talk more about that in the presentation. Other questions or something you'd like to just express in terms of concern? Okay, well, go ahead and keep those in mind. We'll have time for questions a little bit later as well. So speaking of awareness, I'm going to go ahead and just go into a general presentation about the necessity of awareness. The way I like to see it is you can test employees all day long, but if they don't understand the nature of the threat, it's like if you're going, if you're walking through your neighborhood, you're not really going to be on alert because you know the neighbors, you know the environment. But if you walk in a dangerous area, whether it be in a different part of the city or even a different part of the world, where you're not aware of the threats out there, you're easy pickings in that, of course, unless you're super aware. So just raising your cyber awareness, the cybersecurity awareness, I think is critical. So I like to help people with this by, giving a context. So to get started, let's take a brief trip back into yesteryears where pirates terrorized the high seas. These criminals have been romanticized in recent decades, but back in the day, they were very, very scary. In reality, what they did was established a well-organized business model, if you want to believe it, that leveraged aggressive marketing and branding to ensure that they could steal as much booty as possible for the lowest possible cost. So that was the whole point of the Jolly Rogers, the skull and crossbones. When you saw that, you were supposed to be scared enough so that you didn't want to be killed to a man. So rather than that, you just give up your booty, right? You just give up all the goods that was on your ship. So these folks were just too pervasive for the Royal Navy to chase down. And so if you really wanted to protect yourself against pirates back in the day, you had to do it you had to do it for yourself. You had to create your own security on your own ship. So what has changed today? I'm afraid not a whole lot. Maybe the bad guys aren't quite as exciting. We don't know because we rarely ever get a chance to see them. But what we do know is that they are very well organized, they are very dangerous, and they are very good at what they do. So the similarities to the pirates are frightening. These folks know that for the most part, the authorities don't have the resources to crack down on them. So they're operating with near impunity at this stage. There's been some recent updates on that, which is very exciting, but still we haven't ebbed the tide on that. So the only way to protect yourself is to increase the awareness and have the best tools available in your systems to be in place. So bottom line, you don't want to be a soft target. So what do we know about these the cyber criminals? They are some of the best in the business, and they're making it a full-time job, not just to execute the cyber attacks, but they create software for others, less talented folks, to do the same. I don't know if you guys saw the little quote that I coined on the invitation, but it's a new update on an old concept. If you give a man a fish, he learns to, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he'll hack your network. And that's exactly what the good developers are out there. They're not hacking your network. They're just selling their software to many other people so that they can hack your network. It's a lot safer for them. And they're just in the business of doing that. They utilize the dark web to communicate their business. So what is the dark web? I can let the engineers be a little more technical about it, but on a high level, it's a network of servers that requires a special browser that's encrypted and keeps you anonymous and not trackable. So, those of us in the light just tool around on Google, right, or the regular internet. There is a dark web out there that you can get encrypted access to, and that nobody can trace you. So that's really the stage of operations for them. Keep in mind again that this is big business. They have created a real business community. On top of talented developers, they have marketing departments. They have finance departments, if you want to believe it. You'll see in a second, and even more so, customer service. So this drives me the most crazy because it's not customer service, it's actually victim service. But I've actually heard people that say, oh yeah, as soon as we paid the ransom, I called up their customer service and they got me up and running right away. They were great at what like, no, stop talking about that. That is, you were victimized, and these people are not good at what they do. Except they are good at what they do, but they are not looking out for your best interest obviously, right? So interestingly, people ask, well, you shouldn't pay the ransom because, how do you know they're criminals? They may not give it back. The truth is they do want to give it back because this is a business model for them. And if they see people that are just taking the ransom and not returning the files, they actually turn on each other and try to root out those people because they want to keep doing this over and over and over again, so it's profitable for them. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how pervasive and how real this threat is. But if that doesn't help you, these are actually some screenshots off the dark web. This is something that, you know, Raccoon Stealer, we steal, you deal. Like you can just buy. This is ransomware as a service, if you will. And this slide kind of shows you. You see how well put together this slide is, or this site is. You can buy it. You could finance it. You know, this is what I talk about for financing. It is really crazy and really pervasive out there. So with that, and hopefully everybody is alerted and scared sufficiently, I will go ahead and introduce our guest engineers today. I know they've already chimed in, but Brett Ammerman is our chief financial, I'm sorry, not chief financial, but chief technical officer and our chief security officer here, and Bill Townsend, who's our pre-sales engineer and system engineer. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourself quickly. Bill, Brett, you want to start?
You bet. Sorry about that.
Sure.
So I've been with Optimum now for 8+ years, and actually started working with Joe and Tracy, who are our founders, at another large engineering firm. We were all co-workers back then, and Bill worked with me as well at the same company. So seasoned veterans at a Fortune 500 company. And what we decided, what Joe and Tracy decided, was to try and bring small, medium-sized businesses the actual enterprise computer engineering, and that allows you guys to leverage all of the expertise that we gained while we were at that large engineering firm. Bill, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So as Brett mentioned, he and I have known one another since late 2003. I've been in the IT industry for coming on 32 years now. Been through a lot of trials and tribulations and seen security grow from, people saying what's security to having active threats in environments and having to secure against them. I've been here at Optimum for just under 2 years. And as Jonathan said, one of my primary roles is to help you guys figure out what you need in the environment and design solutions around that, and then do a nice warm handoff to the pro services side of the house for them to execute and implement.
Great, thanks, Bill. And let's go ahead and get started, because as I mentioned before, you're not only going to have to worry about your security, but the people you do business with is important, because the bad guys can get at you through other people. And none of those are more important than your actual IT provider. So, Brett, can you talk a little bit about how Optimum is doing, what they're doing to protect themselves or ourselves?
You bet. We like to think of ourselves as one of those companies that's been there, done that, bought several T-shirts, and we have well-established, effective policies and procedures in place. Any tools that we bring into our organization are vetted specifically by me and committee to make sure that we don't overlook any security principles first. And that's really the first litmus test. Do they take care of security? And then secondly, do they take care of the problems that we need to solve for our clients? So most companies like to outsource lots of things. We like to keep things in-house and make sure that we're in control of that, so that we're not looking over our shoulder wondering if our vendors are doing what they're supposed to.
Great. And everything that we talk about from here on out, you can rest assured that Optimum is doing as well. So this is the high overview of each of the layers we're going to be talking about. First, we'll talk about backups. Then we're going to talk about external security, that is mostly firewalls and helping stop things from getting in. Internal is more about your what's happening actually at the workstation level. SOC SIM is a new offering that Brett will help talk to us a little bit about. User training, which we've already covered a little bit, and then we'll hit on policies and procedures. So, Bill, do you want to go ahead and start with I'm sorry, Brett, go ahead and start with the backups.
You bet. Backups, there's 3 immutable laws that go along with backups. First, you have to have good backups. Second, you need to make sure that you're replicating it offsite. and then you have to monitor and test. And that was one of the questions that came in ahead of time, is how do you validate that backups are working correctly? And we've got specific engineers that are broken up to look at different pods of clients to make sure that their backups run successfully every night. We do offer an additional program that allows you to do restores annually or 3 times a year so that you can see that they're working. If not, we can do a special project and validate backups are working correctly. But we do lots of restores with our backup program. We've been using that same program now for almost 7 years, and they're a very trusted client for us. And so if you're not doing these 3 types of things, then we feel like you're not backed up.
So, and Brett, speaking to Joe Dryan's question a little bit earlier, these backups need to be protected and encrypted as well, so that, you know, if worst case scenario, CryptoLopter comes, that the backups are safe and secure. And if that happens, right, then you don't have to worry about paying a ransom. We can wipe your system clean and restore you from backups. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, lots of times you'll see those ransomware issues hit certain pieces of equipment or certain systems like files, and we have the ability. One of the other things that we like to do as a standard is also have local copies of those backups so that we can restore even faster. And then there's additional technology that allows us to create snapshots of that technology, or the data, so that we have the ability to bring servers back on very quickly. So that if there is a server that's been encrypted and it's not bootable any longer, if we have that replication technology on site, then we're back up within a matter of an hour or 2. Whereas if we had to restore from the cloud and bring that data all back down, it might take 2 or 3 days. So there's a cost for everything, but we like to make sure that all of our customers have that ability to make that decision.
And one of the other things I like to just bring up about backups in the current atmosphere, I mean, back in the day, you had backups just in case there was a hardware failure or a natural disaster or something like that would happen. And it was good to be backed up because that type of thing happens, but it doesn't happen every day. Obviously, you live in Colorado, so, you know, the chance of a hurricane, flood, or, you know, an earthquake affecting your data is relatively low. But now your data, your backups are not protecting you against just that. You know, in terms of fire, what are the chances you're going to have a fire? Well, what if there was an arsonist out there with a blowtorch that the cops couldn't catch, and that was torching, you know, server rooms? That's the level of threat that's potentially out there. They're targeting you, and you know, the cyber attacks are much more. Backups are needed more now for cyber attacks than for the natural disasters of how they were originally intended. So that's why they need to be more robust and became even more critical. Bill, can you go into the next level of protection, which would be the external firewall protections?
Sure. So this wouldn't be a firewall to protect against the arsonist that, you know, Jonathan said was running around with the blowtorch. Totally different type of external protection and firewall. First time I've ever actually heard you use that analogy, Jonathan. So I had to laugh a little bit. But anyways, next-gen firewalls are more than simply looking at traffic and analyzing where you're going. Next generation firewalls have the ability to do more advanced feature sets. One of the big things that we do with all of our customers is we do what's called geo-IP blocking. Every country in the world has a set of IP addresses that are allocated to that nation state. So if we know you're not doing business with China, Mongolia, India, you know, Australia, wherever you're not doing business with, if you don't want, you know, bad actors from those nation states knocking on your door, we can block those IP addresses so they can't even get to your firewalls. It immediately drops any and all connection attempts, which is great because that helps to prevent some of that inbound traffic from getting through the firewalls to get to these sites. In addition, it prevents your employees from going to those nation states where a lot of this malicious software is originated. So web content filtering, it's not just about blocking countries, it's also about blocking specific types of data. or specific types of websites. So if you don't want your employees going to social networking sites during business hours, we can set up content filtering rules to block that. So it's not just about preventing people from coming in. It's also about helping your employees not accidentally go out to sites where they shouldn't. And that's where these next gen firewalls can really, help protect you above and beyond just simple port filtering like original firewalls were. The Fortinet firewalls that we typically specialize in also have the ability to scan executables for malicious software and viruses as it's coming inbound. It's a part of the subscription service through the firewall, but again, these are next gen firewalls, not your typical can I get out, can I get in type of firewalls as well. Now, all of that's great, but if you aren't forcing your employees to VPN into the network before they can browse the internet from a company laptop when working remotely, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good for those remote users. And that's where we have the additional tools that we will be talking about next around how to secure your employees while they're remote, while they're getting back to traveling, now that we're getting back to some level of normal business in the current state of the world.
Yeah, and also some employees aren't coming back into the office because they're going to remain working from home. Brett, do you want to talk a little bit about helping folks at the device level?
You bet. So we use WebRoot as our antivirus, and it's kind of nice because it is a local company here in Louisville, Colorado, but don't let that fool you. They have a global presence. They actually scan every IP address on the internet 3 times a day, so that when a website is compromised, they can stop you from getting there because it's a cloud-based protection tool. They also have a DNS component that keeps you from going to bad sites that you shouldn't go to if you have social media concerns and you want to make sure folks are focused at work during the workday. And even if they're outside of the office, this allows us to help that as well. And it does that anti-malware scanning and detection as well in the browser. We also leverage multi-factor authentication. It's not the silver bullet. If somebody is not paying attention and they say, yeah, that's okay, go ahead and log in. You've used these kinds of things at your banking sites and they're becoming more commonplace, but you got to make sure that you're paying attention. Is this really me trying to authenticate to Office 365, or is somebody trying to log in from Lithuania? So it's a great stopper, but it's not perfect. So again, it comes back down to the human footprint that's making the choices. And then we do lots of internal monitoring of applications as well, using a new offering that we've got. So we do have the ability to help protect those remote employees as well.
So speaking of new offerings, Brett, do you want to talk a little bit about SOC-SIM?
You bet. Security Operations Center and Security Information Event Monitoring. This is a new situation for us where we're allowing actually monitoring all activity on all of your computers, as well as Office 365 and your firewall, to make sure that there's no nefarious actions taking place out there. We have a 24/7 support desk that is monitoring this and gets alerts, and it does both computer-based awareness, as well as then it alerts a human, and then a human gets involved and makes sure that we don't have any false positives. But if you've got somebody trying to hack your mailbox in Office 365 at 2 a.m., you'd sure like to have somebody to be there to try and protect you and make sure that we get alerted to it so that we can do some remediation immediately at that point in time. This is not part of a normal offering for us. It's something new, and it does have an additional fee that is applied for this, but it really is starting to take hold with all of the cybercrime that's happening out there in the world today. We just feel like it's that one more ounce of protection that you've got to have that's worth a pound of cure. So
great. Thanks so much, Brett. And we already touched on this, but Bill, can you talk a little bit about our security awareness training program?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we alluded to earlier, the human element, it's the number one cause for security breaches. A lot of people don't know how to recognize a phishing email. They don't understand that when they go to websites that they may be slightly misspelled, C1 SEO versus CISCO, because they don't see those types of things because of the way that those emails are delivered. So to that point, we work with each of our customers that subscribe to security as a service on creating this identity or security awareness tool that teaches them how to spot bad emails, so that when an email comes in that looks like it's from FedEx or it looks like it's from Amazon, and especially during the holiday season, oh, I want to check on that delivery for the presents I ordered, I want to check on that thing, whatever that's going on, it helps them to see that more easily. And in the training, if they click on a bad link, that's part of the active phishing campaigns that we do use for training, they get an immediate pop-up that says, hey, here's what was bad, here's how to identify it in the future. And you then, as managers, get instant feedback as well with reporting on Joe down the hall is click happy and doesn't know or doesn't pay attention to these types of things. In addition to that, the tools that we use, we can go and scan the dark web as well. We partner with a third party that has access into that, and they specialize in scanning the dark web, looking for your email domains to see if any of your email addresses are being actively traded on the dark web. Typically, and in most cases, your email address, especially today, is your login ID. So when you log into a computer, you log in with your email address. You log into Office 365, it's your email address. And we all, as humans, love to have our favorite passwords. Well, if our favorite password was compromised, this dark web scan would tell us about that. We would alert you guys, and then you could go and remediate accordingly. Other things that go into this that are extremely important is we'll run a network detective scan that looks for all of the issues in your environment, and then we can help you to remediate those. So going back to the very early on cyber liability insurance, if you have such, doing these types of reports, having these types of trainings, doing this proactive configuration and action in your environment will help to reduce those premiums in most cases. It's kind of like if you've got a teenager, you put the little plug in the OBD port for the safe driving report so that your insurance doesn't skyrocket because you've got a 16-year-old driver. Same type of thing. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as Brett mentioned a second ago.
Great, Bill. And it's not a line item, but do you want to talk a little bit about multi-factor authentication and the importance of that as well?
Sure. We've all seen in the press about the compromises, and in a lot of cases, it's because somebody has gotten into your email or gotten into your systems because it's just a username and a password. Forever and a day ago, it would take an army of computers, weeks and weeks and weeks to crack passwords. Now we've got computers that can do a week's worth of work in a minute. So cracking passwords is become commonplace. And as such, you need to have more than just a username and a password protecting your environment. And this is where MFA, or multi-factor authentication, comes into play. It's not just a username and a password, but it's also an application on your smartphone or a text to your phone number or things of that nature that gives you a 6-digit code or a biometric fingerprint to access your Office 365 environment, your online banking, your online HR system. All of those things have more than one layer of security to get into them. And if you're not using MFA today, at least for your Office 365 environment, you really should look at, what it would take to enable it for your company and how to better protect it. And yes, it's a pain to have to type in a username, type in a password, and then type in a 6-digit code or click yes on the application when it sends you the push notification. But email is the number one vector for fooling people into doing something that they don't want to do. So best to do at least MFA on your Office 365 environment, and then add it to VPN or remote desktop or online banking or whatever else that you can as you continue to do your business.
Great, thanks, Bill. And Brett, now we're talking about passwords, really that centered around policy a lot of the time. So can you talk a little bit about sort of the, what folks can do from a policy standpoint and their organizations?
You bet. First, lots of folks get comfortable with passwords and they don't like to have them expire. And then when they do, their accounts get locked out and it causes all kinds of problems. So passwords have become a necessary evil, but there's also policies around that. How long does a password last? How long does it need to be? When do we have to change it? Those kinds of things. Can I remember how many passwords? So we write policies and help our clients out with those kinds of issues. Also acceptable use policies and making sure that you know where you can access the network from. Is it okay to access it from home, from a personal machine or not? And can I use my mobile device? How protected is that mobile device from being hacked if I have company data on there? So all kinds of policies and protections that go along with that. We also leverage a lot of protection for email, for spear phishing and spoofing, and that includes that sender policy framework. There's additional DNS protection that goes along with that, DMARC and DKIM, and those are more advanced and really help keep from having those emails come in that say, hey, I'm your boss and I need you to get me 5 gift cards from Amazon and send me the code so that I can give them to the right people. Those kinds of things happen continuously out there. And so the SPF helps, but DMARC and DKIM actually just about completely stop it. And then audit assistance around compliance. If you have requirements for GDPR, SOC 2, those kinds of things, we help out with audit situations. And is also along with getting your cyber insurance squared away. Anytime Greg needs to get help with a policy, we can be there to help you guys make sure we answer the questions correctly for you so that we can minimize those costs from those policies. So.
Great, Brett. And the last line there, supply chain threats. I mentioned earlier that people or companies can be vulnerable from other companies. And that can be pretty concerning, but with policies around that, that's also helpful. Is that correct?
You bet. Yeah, and what you'll end up seeing is that email comes in what you think is from your supply chain, and it really has been intercepted on their end, and now it's being replied to from somebody else. And so then all of a sudden you're saying we have to change our payment to go to a different location, and so you have to really scrutinize that information when it comes in. So be very careful when you're dealing with changes that happen. Always think 3 things. Is this the right time for this email to be coming in? Did it come in at 2 a.m.? Is this the right person? Really scrutinize that SMTP address or that email address. And is this the right thing that should be happening? Would they be asking me? And if you have any questions about it all, pick up the phone or go walk down the hall. Make sure you're talking to the right person. So,
right.
Yeah, so this kind of dovetails back into what I was talking about with multi-factor authentication. I know that there have been companies where the bad actors get into the Office 365 environment and they watch and they read these emails for a period of time to find those type of supply chain emails, or to find when a donation campaign is starting to go on if you're a nonprofit, things of that nature. And then they will capture the signatures off of an email. They'll copy and paste it into a brand new email, and they will create a brand new domain of, instead of it being myco.com, it'll be mycoo.com. So just a subtle change that most people aren't going to look for. And then they'll insert themselves into the conversation and create a rule inside of your Office 365 environment that redirects those legitimate emails outbound to them, and they become a man in the middle. And people are none the wiser. And as a result, that donation from a company you were waiting for, or that payment that you were waiting to come in, never shows up because it's been redirected, because like what Brett said, you now have a new ABA and routing number to send it to for that electronic transfer of funds. So this is why multi-factor is super important, because it helps with these things that we're talking about.
And that SOC SIM component that we were talking about also alerts you that if somebody's logging into your email address or your Office 365 mailbox from across the globe, and you're going to go, why is that happening? And we can block that and stop that immediately so that they can't get that information, that because they really don't want you to know that they're there. They're not going to do anything until the last minute when they're ready to strike. They're just going to hang out and watch and wait and find their opportunity, and then they're going to take over. But when they log in from Lithuania or Russia or China, that's when we catch them. So they haven't done anything at that point in time. But that's why we have the tools that we have at this point.
Very good. So in conclusion, folks, awareness is the biggest key out there. So either through awareness training that we talked about, or just keeping it present, keeping that threat present with your employees, maybe even sending them to this training if you think that would be helpful. We're happy to have them on board for this as well. Multi-layer approach is critical. Gone are the days, oh, I have antivirus, I'm fine. Oh, I have a firewall, I'm fine. No, you have to, as you saw through this presentation, there are many, many more layers, policy layers. There are things like the SOC SIM that we talked about, the monitoring, the maintenance of what's going on. Something we didn't talk about, but it's bread and butter to what Optimum has been doing for since our inception is making sure your systems are patched and up to date. Windows 7 is a huge threat if you still have that on your network. So we work closely with all of our clients to root out all Windows 7 operating systems because they're no longer patchable. And we keep all of our clients' workstations and servers patched and up to date. That's another critical layer. So just layer after layer after layer. It's not really one person's job anymore or just one tool. It really takes a team and approach. And last but not least, as we went in and we started with and we're going to end with, just make sure you have those backups. At Optimum, we don't only just do the backups that Brett described earlier, but we also do a cloud-to-cloud backup of, if you're in the Microsoft 365 environment. And it's really just keeping that in mind of, backups aren't just for mistakes or for breakdowns or for hardware or natural disasters. They're also to help combat what people are doing out there from the cybersecurity perspective. So I typically build more time in for questions. Oh yeah, before we get to questions, I do like to plug our next workshop. Many folks that are on this call have been to this productivity workshop already, but I will send an invite again. This is our response to so many people needing to work from home right now. And a lot of folks have the Microsoft 365 environment, and they're not using it to the best of its abilities, or folks might be on many different platforms like a G Suite or a Slack or a Dropbox. They're using all these things, and they have Microsoft 365 on top of that. Well, this is a live demo that shows you the power and the convenience and the ease of the system. And I really recommend either if you know people that are reluctant to get on board with Microsoft 365, or if you're on it and you just like to see more about what it can do, this is a great workshop for that. So feel free to attend if you haven't already. If you have already, feel free to send the invite out. And I'll get the invite out probably by tomorrow. And as I said, we're a little bit early here. I typically build more time in for questions, and we have more questions or concerns during that section earlier on. But I'd like to open it up. Go ahead and unmute. And if you have questions, concerns, either for our engineers or for Greg on the liability side, please let us know now. Or you can put some questions in the chat, and I'm happy to relay those.
Yeah, I was going to say there are a couple that, or at least one that came in from Krista. Krista, you asked about personal VPNs for employees working at home. So are you asking with regards to when they're at home, connecting to the internet using a VPN, or at home using a VPN connect to things in Office 365? Or can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I was thinking if you buy a personal VPN for your home, but you still log into your remote server that Optimum is servicing, is that better protection?
So in that instance, if depending on the policy of your company, if you allow employees to use their own personal devices, then you run the risk of, are they patching their home computers? Are they keeping their antivirus up to date? Things of that nature. Our recommendation is if they're doing work for the company, you should probably restrict that type of access to company-owned assets. If it's just a web interface for like email and things of that nature, those are typically over an SSL connection, and the likelihood of somebody, sniffing a username and a password off of a secure web browser is less. So that's where you need to think about how you do business and how much risk you want to introduce by allowing personally owned devices on your network.
I see. That's good. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And Annette is chiming in and thanking Optimum Networking for doing an annual failover restore, testing the backups, and that is something that we do for our clients, and we appreciate you pointing that out, Annette. Other questions out there?
Can you guys go in a little bit more detail about, I think you call it DMARC or DM, regarding
demarking TCAM,
those phony emails that come in from the boss that says, buy these things? That's happened to us in the past.
Sure. So the best way to describe DKIM is like we were talking about a minute ago. You go to your online banking site and you get that little gold lock in the browser window that tells you it's a secure connection.
Mm-hmm.
DKIM does something similar where it does a digital signature on the email. So the sending server has one part of the key, and then there's a public DNS that has the other part of the key. So when your email servers receive the emails, it says, do you have the public key? Or do you have the private key? Here's the public key. Can I authenticate that email as being valid? So it takes a little bit of time, as Annette can attest to, depending on how many of these services you're using. So if you're using like an Emma, a SurveyMonkey, a Blackbot, a whomever to send emails out on behalf of your company, every company has a slightly different process for setting up DKIM. And then DMARC is the validation portion of that. So it's another DNS entry that says what to do with email if you don't find it validated with a DKIM signature, if you don't find it validated with an SPF record. So that DMARC policy says either do what you want with it, take your normal spam precautions, or quarantine it because it doesn't pass muster. Or if you're absolutely certain that 100% of your services are set up right, flat out reject it if it doesn't pass muster. And that helps to prevent those emails that look like they come from the boss from coming into the system. And Brett, you're on mute.
Generally what you see is the email will be valid because it comes from a valid domain. And if you look at it in the header information, it's generally some 1234556@gmail.com. So there's nothing wrong with the email itself other than they're impersonating someone who looks like you. And so that's where you end up using that DMARC, DKIM, and SPF to try and thwart that from ever actually getting to your clients. So the question about personal VPN, the only time that I think that that really is warranted, and it was a great question, is if you're on a public Wi-Fi, if like DIA, you go out to their free Wi-Fi, or if you're downtown and you latch onto free Wi-Fi, it's better to be protected because you don't know who's out there lurking in that public Wi-Fi and what they may have done. Starbucks is another place. Sometimes you think you're on a Starbucks, but you're really not. It's somebody who's set up a hotspot that looks just like Starbucks and makes you think that you're safe. So try and be cautious whenever you're on public wireless access. And that's when a VPN really comes into play the most. Good, great question.
Okay, we have just a few more minutes if anybody else has any last minute questions. Okay, great. Well, some questions may come up down the line, and if so, feel free to email them to us or access or give us a call. You can, if you're clients of ours, you can even open a ticket or talk to the support desk, or you can talk to your account manager as well. And we certainly would get that over to you, addressing any questions, concerns you might have. Well, again, I appreciate everybody for joining us today. Thanks again for your time, because I know how valuable that is. Hopefully you did get some valuable takeaways from this workshop, and hopefully we'll see you at our next one, and have a great rest of the week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.